Good morning, everyone. Excited for you to be here today. Got my coffee. I'm excited for this presentation. Just want to thank everyone for attending our kickoff to the New Horizons speaker series. Also want to thank you for being part of our 60th anniversary as a chapter. My name is Ryan Connell. I'm supporting AFCEA today with this event. Just some administrative things before we get started. So if you can see in your control panel, a few options, but you should see the chat feature. That's how we're going to make today's session interactive. And so if you start posting questions in there, we're going to be rattling those off towards the end of the presentation for our guest speaker to be answering those. Today's is being recorded, and also the slides will be available after our presentation. We're going to upload things to our AFCEA website. And so tomorrow you should receive a post-event email, and that'll have a link to the recording. So if you want to view it later. With that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Edgar Sobelvero from Red Hat, our sponsor for today's event, and he's going to be introducing today's speaker.
Thanks, Brian, for the introduction, and to the AFCEA Lexington chapter for having me. Good morning, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Edgar Sobelvero, and I'm the regional manager for the Air Force team here at Red Hat, world's leading provider of commercially supported enterprise open source software. Today, I have the privilege of introducing the first ever Chief Experience Officer of the Air Force, Mr. Colt Whittall. Not only is this the first such position in the Air Force, but also the DoD. In case the audience is not familiar with the CXO position, the role focuses on improving the overall user experience of IT within the Air Force. Whether it be collaborating with senior leaders, defining the overall approach to transform user experience, and even advising acquisitions, it's clear that this is a significant position with plenty of responsibility. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Whittall. Sir, good morning to you, and the floor is yours.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Yeah, and thanks for joining in. I know it's early. Personally, I haven't even left the hotel yet. I'm at a hotel in DC today. I actually live in Atlanta. Let me just say a couple things. I've been involved with AFCEA for quite a while, and great organization. So thanks for letting me talk to you. Including I know a number of folks up there at Hanscom. Some of you are probably on the line. At the Lexington chapter. Just a little bit of background for those of you that don't know. I come out of the kind of the commercial digital consultancy world with Deloitte for a few years, and then part of a kind of e-commerce CRM sort of practice that we spun out of Deloitte and as a separate company called Round Arch. And then ultimately, we grew it and sold the company, and I left a couple of years ago. And, I went through a little process of, after seeing a TED video actually on using the design and thinking methodology from IDEO and Tim Brown, based on his book, Design Thinking. The video was about figuring out what you want to do with your future career, sort of design your future career and lifestyle using the design thinking methodology. And kind of going through that process, I wrote a design brief, went through all the 5 steps, including testing different options, figured out ways to go test different possible career paths. And in the course of doing that, found myself, meeting at the Pentagon with Mr. Marion, Bill Marion, who hired me into this role and created the role. And that's how this came about. The timing was right. At the time, there was clearly a recognition that user experience was a trouble area in the Air Force, and we needed to do something about it. And so that's why the role was created, and that's how I got into it. So it's a HQE appointee kind of thing. Okay, so let me kind of get into the meat of it. Let's see if I can operate the slides. There we go. Did it change? Good.
Yep.
Okay. So user experience in the Air Force. I get this question a lot. What does user experience have to do with the Air Force and the military in general, right? We are not selling anything. We are not a service providing to the, to customers. Why? Well, let me just explain. So user experience in the Air Force, I think, requires a little bit of a different definition. I view it as it's the information technology that powers our work, optimized with users for how they use it in the real world out in the wild where we can't control it. And it's got to be responsive and reliable. And if we do all of that, we're going to have mission success. Somebody who recently left the AFCEA organization, Major General Kennedy, several times he advised me, Colt, you got to relate it to the mission. And I'll attempt to do that here in the next 2-3 pages. But this is, don't think of user experience as fluffy. Don't think of it as look and feel. Don't think of it as just making people happy. It's not. It can be all those things, by the way. If you're selling cosmetics, it might be, right? But let me explain how this is important. First of all, let me go back in history a little bit and just make the point that user experience is in the Air Force's DNA. All right. We practically invented the field of human factors engineering, which is, of course, still around. It goes back to Lieutenant Colonel Paul Fitz and the B-17 in Wright Pat Air Force Base. You go read the history, and I'm going to have some sources here at the end, and you can go check the article. There's a great article in Wired magazine, not very long. It's called something like "How the Bad Design of a Plane Led to the Macintosh." It's in Wired magazine. If you Google Lieutenant Colonel Paul Fitz Wired magazine, you'll probably find it. But basically, what happened was in World War II, well, a little before, and in World War II, we were losing way too many B-17s and pilots and crews, and they were literally flying the planes into the runway. And the Air Force hired a psychologist who had been a lieutenant colonel. They brought in a psychologist, and the psychologist's job was actually to figure out what are the characteristics of a good pilot and go figure out how to hire better pilots that wouldn't fly the plane into the ground. And he studied all the patterns in the data of the crashes and began to see a lot of similarities that, wait a minute, there was some smoke in the cockpit, maybe the lights went out in the cockpit, certain things were happening, and he, said, look, let's figure out what's going on here. It turns out that all of the controls that, ran the things like the bomb bay doors and the landing gear and, the flaps, I'm not a pilot, as you can tell, they were kind of the same, and they were too easy to hit the wrong control, particularly if you were under stress or you had, degraded conditions in the cockpit for whatever reason. And they invented what's now known as shape coding, and this is literally the source. It's why all the controls on in your car are shaped a little differently. You see it in airplanes to this day. They're all shaped a little different. They all look a little different. They're coded in different colors to make it easier for the pilot to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong thing. So what are some consequences of bad user experience? All right, you can see them all over the military. Slow PCs and networks at boot up and throughout the use of common applications. The Lifecycle Management Center did an analysis, did a great job on this, and calculated that they lose about 7.8 hours of productivity per person per week due to poor user experience of PCs. And what I'm talking about is slowness, loss of time booting up in the morning, loss of time doing common tasks, loss of times when things crash, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Time wasting annoyances. You can probably, this is a screenshot of the fitness application. You can probably find it out on Reddit and who knows where else. For years, 500,000 airmen, plus or minus, were using this application a couple times a year, 1, 2, 3 times a year for fitness test reasons. And it's kind of a notorious example because when you come as an airman to take this, to look at this once or twice a year, maybe 3, anyway, however many times a year, it's not that many. The thing that you need is buried under 8 levels of navigation, and the front end code's not even implemented that well. So you have to mouse down the entire stack of these things, and almost all of it is acronyms that most people wouldn't even know. It's the exact opposite of user-centered design, right? If this is the report that 500,000 people need to come see, you plaster it right in the middle of the main page and make it abundantly obvious, and all of the supporting features and functionality get worked into an information architecture that's driven by what users need and when they need it, and who they are, right? So this is just an example of something that was designed with, essentially by engineers who didn't understand the user and what they were trying to do, or maybe they just had some other competing reason in the process that was not valid. Reduced readiness. I'll just point you at the end towards the reports on the ALICE system from GAO that user experience factors and usability factors are contributing to some of the issues they're facing with the ALICE system on F-35. Citizen panic. Everybody probably remembers the fiasco out in Hawaii, where I cannot remember. I think it might have been a National Guardsman. I'm not quite sure. A public official, intended to test the emergency alert system about an inbound, a missile, and instead hit the alert, and it literally was a link, an HTML page, hit a link, and instead hit the one to actually trigger the alert. And of course, basically the citizens of Hawaii thought they were under an inbound missile attack from North Korea. By the way, that blue test message that you see there, that was added later to make it more clear which one is the test. But the real alert is the PACOM CDW state only at the bottom, and the monthly test, you can see it there, and you see the false alarm. So anyway, it was a confusing bit of navigation that literally led to that fiasco. And then, unfortunately, loss of life also has resulted from bad user experience. And I would encourage you to take a look at the ProPublica articles and the the NTSB report on the John McCain incident. And there were many factors at play in that situation, but one of them very clearly was a confusing digital user interface to control the throttle. And somebody hit a button either deliberately or accidentally, or didn't know exactly what it did, not sure, but decoupled the throttles so that the left engine was not powered quite as much, and nobody noticed it, which seems impossible, but nobody did. And that's why the ship veered to the left and collided. And we lost, 11 or 12, 10 sailors. So some benefits. So anyway, point of all that is user experience does matter in DoD, whether it's productivity or any of those other issues. Benefits of good user experience. I haven't fleshed this slide out much. It's not pretty, but let me just say, improve productivity and operational experience, reduce training costs and time, reduce documentation costs and time, faster time to market, lower support costs, increase employee or customer satisfaction, litigation deterrence, reduce development and maintenance costs and time. You can actually spend less money producing a good user experience. I won't go into all the details behind that, but it involves, coupling user-centered design with DevSecOps, and or Agile. And again, in the materials at the end, I'll point you to an article about the business case for user experience, and you can take a look at that and dig into it. And if you are dealing with issues where you need to make the business case for a better user experience, I can point you to some resources that will help you. So what should we expect in the Air Force? We need to expect a fast system. It should be highly responsive, above all else. And the science all bears this out. And of course, your own experience bears this out, right? When the machine is fast, when it responds to you, things feel easy. You can get work done. Your machine works at the sort of flow, at the speed that you think and write or calculate or whatever it is that you're doing. As the machine slows down a little bit, you tend to get a sense that you're maybe working a little harder. I mean, think about it. Then you start getting a sense that the computer is working a little harder. Then you start getting the sense that, wait a minute, the computer is slowing me down, so the computer is slow. And I think right now in the Air Force, this is pretty much every day for what we're dealing with. And I'll drill into that a bit more in a minute. And then you start getting the sense that, the computer is just flat out broken, right? So as things really bog down, I would say the average day for an airman is kind of in that the computer is slow category. And of course, occasionally we get into that situation where it's over there at the far right. So responsiveness, critical productivity, unresponsive PCs slow us down, interrupt our work, and waste our time. And our airmen tell us that, right? I'll talk about a survey that we do in a minute, but I'm hearing loud and clear that airmen think that the user experience of the systems they use is slow, it hurts their productivity, it hurts the mission, and it wastes their time. And none of that is good. So this is kind of, I don't know, I find this sort of humorous. How about my productivity? So I think this is my desk at home, and I realize it's a bit of a cluttered mess, but I like it, and I can work there. So I think that maybe he had a purpose in doing this, but when I took this job in June of 2019, I was issued the standard, G2 with a spinning disk drive and about 8 gig RAM. It's the same device that's carried by, I'm going to guess, I've got the data somewhere, but at least 200,000 airmen, basically same device, and it may be a lot higher than that. I'd have to look at the chart. So very common device in the Air Force. And let me just say that this type of device with a spinning disk and comparable RAM is what 85 to 95% of the PCs in the Air Force are. They may not be laptops, but those types of specs, that's what the vast majority of the gear in the Air Force is. All right, so I got that. And then I added on at my own personal expense another monitor. Over there on the right is my government issued iPad. Not many people get that. I'm glad I have it because that's what I do email on, because I can do email and read at least 1.5 times faster, maybe more than that, probably really more than that, because it's instantly on. I can access everything. It's quick. You can turn around stuff quickly. So at least 1.5 times productive, but only in email. Now, where do I really get productive? It's the one I'm using right now. It's my personal MacBook Pro. It's whatever the most powerful one I could get at the time was. And I'm at least twice as productive on that, probably more so. So you get the idea, and I think anybody who's used these systems would probably agree that the multipliers are probably somewhere in that range. So now the question is, what do we do about this? So this is what airmen tell us. User experience today: slow, unreliable, inconsistent, waste my time, tied to my desk, clunky and outdated, requires training, and a bit of a black box in terms of the service and support. Where do we need to go? The opposite of all of that, right? Reliable and consistent, respects my time anywhere, anytime, anywhere, modern and lethal, intuitive, responsive, and transparent, right? So notice, nowhere in here is pretty, feels good. I don't see that, or delight. By the way, I like the word delight. Frankly, I think if we did all those things on the right, we would have an entire Air Force of delighted users. I am completely confident, but that's not my goal. My goal really is those things on the right. And then through that, I think, if we magically could do that in a week, people would be absolutely delighted for about a week, and then it would become routine, and they would start demanding the next thing. And frankly, I think that's good. That's what they should expect. So how do we transform? The bridge across this is really, it's optimized IT applications, optimized user journeys, and optimized infrastructure. All of that has to work. So here's some things we're doing. Improve the user experience of existing systems. We set up an organization about a year ago called Roll IT. And what we do is we scan the issues and look for things that we can improve that are, we have some filtering criteria. Noticeable to users, measurable, scalable to the entire enterprise. And when we see those things, we deploy focus teams to go out and deliver them. First, analyze them, and then, come up with an engineering solution and then deliver them. And I'll talk about a couple of those in a second. No, I'll talk about them right now. So here's one, Chaz Fastpass. So a team led mainly out of Tinker. Analyzed the email transaction path, and there were something like 42 hops. And you may recall that if you were at AFITC in August last summer, we talked a lot about, there's like 42 hops in the email system. So what do? I won't even go into all of it, but essentially made a number of changes to get the number of hops down, and it produced a solid, measurable benefit. And the survey data, the before after, actually shows that most people noticed the benefit. Proxy bypass, we're working on this right now, tested it at several bases. It's now in rollout across the Air Force. Essentially what we're doing is eliminating some parts of the base boundary and using more features of another part. And the net result is that it improves response time and also saves money. Another thing we're working on is solid state drives. And I mentioned solid state drives before. This is a big one for me. If I were, in the Marvel movies, right, Thanos and his little, his glove that he snaps his fingers and, you get the idea. I won't give it away if you're one of the, 5 people on the planet that hadn't seen the movie. So if I could snap my fingers and do one thing, it would be to upgrade every spinning disk in the Air Force to a solid state drive. Why is that? We run a complicated security stack with a few different applications on the endpoint to secure the endpoint. Those applications are disk intensive, disk IO intensive. And on a spinning disk with lower disk IO capability, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. I mean, it's shockingly bad. So we need to fix that. So we need to work on both the endpoint security and make it run faster. But I don't know that even if we completely optimize it, we're going to get where we need to be. And really the answer is we need to be on a path to get the spinning disks out of the Air Force. Now, I will tell you this, our peers over at the Army are way ahead of us. They're already up to about 50% solid state drives. I don't know if they did that accidentally or if they just recognized it faster than we did. But they're well ahead of us. We're maybe 15%, like I said, 5 to 15% solid state drives. So this is something that is very important, and it yields results. When you go out and just anecdotally ask people who have upgraded, they will tell you the difference is huge. And the data bears it out. I've got all kinds of data. I'm not going to show it all here. But if anyone has any concerns or questions about this, I can talk about it all day long and show you what it does and the difference that it makes when you have a solid state drive and device running our security. So we upgraded the minimum standards. That went into effect last summer. And the way that I understand it, I don't have an account on Appway, but the way that I understand it is that I think starting this fall, I'm not sure going to be able to even purchase a spinning disk anymore unless you specifically need it for something. There's certain things where people actually do want them, mainly in desktops, but I'm not worried about that. They have a reason. So anyway, we're working on that, and that's a big one. Okay, build the next generation of systems. I'm not going to talk about this today, but as you know, we're working on the ITaaS, network as a service, end user services, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not going to talk about that today, but that is where we're going as well. And, a lot of the driver for ITaaS is user experience. Keep that in mind. And if you look at the measurements that we really care about for the success of ITaaS, a tremendous amount of those are connected to user experience. So just keep that in mind. So this is the area where I really spend a lot of my time, is the bottom half of this chart, refining and optimizing. How do we do that? I would encourage you, if you were not able to see at the AFITC conference this summer, the virtual one, the IBM CIO, Fletcher Previn, gave a fantastic talk on Monday. It was a great industry keynote. And he focused on his process for managing IT in a large enterprise. And, really what it is it's a net promoter score driven consumer. He runs the IT enterprise at IBM almost as if he were a IT services company accountable to net promoter score, which is a way of measuring customer experience and customer loyalty to your brand. And I would encourage you to look it up. That's what they're doing. It's a very consumer-oriented, NPS-driven approach to managing enterprise IT. So we're trying to do something a little bit similar to that. So in other words, measure the user experience that we are providing as a service to the entire Air Force, and then gather feedback on that and be able to respond to that and improve it over time, right? You know what they say, if you can't measure it, what gets measured gets done, right? So by collecting this data, we can feed this data into the OODA loop at many different levels, right? At the software application / program level, all the way to the functional level, to the IT management level, to the CMO kind of level, and Mr. Lombardi and others who manage IT portfolios. So what we're doing is we're gathering data as if we were an IT services company, which we kind of are. I won't talk about those first two things, application and IT support data, but I will talk about this one, digital experience monitoring. For ITAS, we are already capturing performance, response time / user experience at the glass, application by application, base by base. And we have the ability to compare it, before, after, big change. And that's phenomenal. That is the kind of capability that we need. So we are now working on a pilot, which is not live yet, but will be here in a few weeks, where we will do this for a small set of endpoints randomly distributed around the Air Force, so that we can understand the level of service that we're providing right out there at the glass as the airman experiences it. It's sort of the outside-in approach to digital experience monitoring. So that is underway. My new boss, Ms. Mausenberger, is very excited about it. And this is data that will feed sort of her dashboard and many others, and we'll make very transparent. Next thing, Air Force IT Pulse, so user feedback. And this is something that we launched in late January. I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but you definitely should be. So just like an airline or a rental car company or a hotel or any IT services company is collecting user feedback, we are now doing that. And the way that we do it is we do it every single business day. We send out originally it was 5, now it's 7-question survey, 1 required question. You can finish it in a minute, or you can write a bunch of comments and it takes longer. You can do it on mobile, although few people do. But it only goes to airmen at most twice a year. A lot of them may not even see it twice a year. Essentially, it's sending it out randomly across the Air Force, and then it locks you out, once you get it. And what do we do with that data? We have a dashboard. I see it instantly. I can log into it right now. I can tell you what the numbers look like as of literally this second. And I look at it every day, and I look at the comments every day. We have, as of last night, we have about 74,000 comments from airmen. We have text analytics capability, so we have this tremendous, constantly updating, ability to mine the comments and understand what airmen are concerned about, or their suggestions, what they think works well, plus what works bad. And we have demographic capability because it's connected to Air Force Directory Services. We can slice the data all the way down to the base level, rank, MAGCOM, career field, et cetera, et cetera. So with all of that, if I want to understand, which bases are providing the best level of service all the way to the ones that aren't. And then I can look at the comments from the ones that are providing the best level of service to the ones that aren't, and I can understand the differences. I can also track terms. So, as the whole response to COVID thing happened, we could see VPN trending up. Just like if you go to Google Trends, I'm sure everybody knows how that works. We can do essentially the same thing. So I can track a term like VPN or remote access or DSET or, JRSS or whatever I want to track, and follow how it's trending over time. And if it's trending up, that's generally bad. But I can also look at the term and then check the sentiment on the term. So I could go on that one all day long, so I'll leave it at that. But we do have a lot of people using the data now. There's actually a few more in addition to this list. So this is getting around. We don't have a ton of accounts, but we have 1-2 people in each of these organizations. And to be honest with you, I think we've just started figuring out how to take advantage of this data. We're at the very early stages of this still, but it is very, very helpful. Okay, and then event correlation. We're not doing this yet, but I think we're relatively close. So once we have all of this, let's call it telemetry, right? Once we have all of this telemetry about the user experience, then we can start to understand, okay, so if Role IT implements proxy bypass or CHES Fastpass, which I already talked about, we know from tests that those projects produce benefit, right? But the problem is when we implemented those, we couldn't necessarily see at the glass, did the response time improve, right? It should. We have internal data that says it should. But now we're going to be able to start to correlate events. We'll know that an event in this part of the network degraded this user experience in this way at this time for how long, or something positive improved it in this way, for how long, and you get the idea. So we can start to really understand the service level that we're providing. And then, and then all of that, as I said earlier, feeds into this user experience OODA loop, which really there's multiple layers of OODA loops, right? If you're a comm squadron, you have your OODA loop. If you are the chief management officer, CMO has, his or her OODA loop. You get the idea. And then, of course, I'm not really going to talk about this much. Well, I will talk about it a little bit. UX acquisition is a key component of this, UX skills and UX tools. Let me just say a couple things on this, because I know we're getting a little short on time, I think. I was hoping to finish in 40 minutes. I guess we'll probably still will. We have a vast portfolio of applications across the Air Force. And if you think about it, I'm trying to improve that overall user experience score that I'm tracking, right? Just like somebody's trying to improve the overall customer sat of a major IT services company. So where do I start, right? If you're me, and I can argue it multiple ways, right? But if you look at our portfolio of thousands of applications, and it's really that big, we have a small number of applications that have hundreds of thousands of users. We have several applications that are north of 500,000 users. Now, most of these are not, they're not applications that are weapons. They're not weapon systems, right? These are human resources, personnel types of things, FM types of things. You guys know a lot of these applications, right? So I won't go through the list. But, there's two things that come to mind. By improving the user experience of those systems, you improve the user experience of the IT that touches the most people. So I care about the user experience of those systems a lot, right? Because everybody touches them. They may not touch them all the time, although some people do, the people that work in personnel, right? Personnelists. But I care a lot about those systems because everybody has to use them a little bit, and they affect everybody, right? They affect me, they affect people in uniform, they affect everybody. And then also for another reason, and it's that, and this is something that I hear a lot from people, particularly like squadron commander kind of people, majors, lieutenant colonels, they say, it's the non-core mission stuff that just wears people out. And just, I did not serve in uniform. I'm taking all of this secondhand just from listening to people, but the impression that I get is I think there's probably a little bit more tolerance for a bad user experience in things that are used, more as a weapon system than these things that you have to use and are required to use just to get paid and to make sure that, healthcare happens for your family, et cetera. Or that, appraisals get done and reviews get done and that kind of stuff. So I frequently hear, it's this non-core mission stuff that just wears people out, frustrates them, and they can organize, they can train, they can do things to compensate for some of these other systems. So I think we should be working to improve the user experience of all of this technology, just to be clear. One can make an argument that it's the tactical, mission critical, specialized things that are actually by far the most important, and I can make that argument. I just personally tend to spend most of my time focused on these things that affect everybody. So FYI. A couple of things. User experience staffing. So one thing that may surprise people is that at Kessel Run, and everybody's probably heard a lot about Kessel Run, particularly up at your chapter. But the UX staffing ratio is about 1 user experience professional to about 6.5 to 7 developers. That's pretty good. And what do I mean by user experience professional? What I mean is, a formally trained, experienced user experience researcher / designer. who is equipped with all the right tools and all the right techniques and is integrated into the methodology, for software development in the right way. That's what I mean. And you will find very large software programs in the Air Force that have essentially no user experience, people on the team. It's fairly common. They'll have some requirements analysts, and they'll have some functional analysts. They may have some functional experts that are there to represent the user, but they assume that software engineers can do the design of the user interface, and that's just not the case. It's not the case at all. They don't want to do that, right? There's exceptions, obviously, but in general, that is not what they want to do, and that is in general how you get the kind of result that I talked about on the fitness management application. So this is very, very, very important. This is a big one, and this is something that we've got to work on, which is why I'm harping on it here a little bit. In my view, every software factory in the Air Force and every software program needs to be working on their staffing model, and the applications people that are acquiring these programs need to be, adjusting how they acquire it, to make sure that this is what they're getting. Because without this kind of staffing, you're not going to get the result that you want in terms of user experience. I can guarantee it. Design systems. I don't know how familiar you are with design systems. People may be familiar with the concept of a style guide, right? So a style guide basically says, here's the colors, the typefaces, here's the types of images we're going to use, here's sort of roughly, those things, right? It's kind of look and feel stuff. Design systems go beyond that, right? Design systems include everything that you would see in a style guide, but they also get down into here's how we're going to use, here's the kinds of page layouts we're going to use, here's how we're going to use buttons, here's how we're going to do, certain transactions. And it even includes the front end code to make that happen. So it includes the creative assets, the front end code, all of it in order to implement the visual interface, right? The user interface. This is a big deal, right? So there are probably 100 plus major design systems in the US, right? Google has one that you can use called Material UI. Adobe has one. There are a whole bunch of big name ones, some that you buy, some that are open source. The federal government has created one under the 21st Century Idea Act. It actually required it, and it's administered by GSA. It's called the US Web Design System. Kessel Run has a design system that's based on Google's Material UI. I think it's called KRUI. We need design systems in the Air Force, and we're working on a policy right now. I would say we're in the very early stages of a policy that would require use of a design system essentially everywhere in the Air Force. Now, we're not going to retroactively go force implementation of it. That would make no economic sense. But we're developing software all the time, and software programs come to me all the time and say, hey, tell me what visual style I should be using, because that we're making it up over and over and over and over again. So by using design systems and having maybe a small number or even one standard design system in the Air Force, I don't think one is the right answer, by the way, we're going to get a bunch of benefits, right? We're going to get consistent implementation of UX best practices, including navigation, interactions, buttons, forms, et cetera. We're going to get better browser compatibility. I don't know if you're aware of this, but we have software all over the place that works in one browser but not another. It drives people nuts. I hear it all the time from users. They don't like the fact that this application works over in this browser and not in the other, and yada, yada, yada. It's ridiculous. So we'll get better browser compatibility. We'll get responsive design. So US Web Design System, out of the box, responsive design. It helps inexperienced UX designers get up to speed faster because they get more of kind of a Lego block type approach to how they're going to design. It helps promote reuse of code and other artifacts, so we don't have to keep recreating it all the time and paying to do it. And it makes our software developers more productive. So it's also part of speed and agility. So Nick Chalon and I have been talking about this, and I've been talking about it with many others. Like I said, in the works, we have a community, a UX design community of interest, and this is a big topic for that group. And we have our monthly call on Friday. We'll be talking about it again. And I'm also working with other agencies on it. I've got some collaborators over at Jake, GSA, and other places that I'm in communication with, and U.S. Digital Services and Defense Digital Services. We're talking frequently and trying to figure out what the best path forward is for us. Results achieved so far, and we're close to done. So here's my Air Force IT Pulse survey results. This is only through July 13, but the trend is pretty similar to that from for the last 2 months. I need to update the chart. Bottom line, from late February, early March, we grew user satisfaction from the low 20% range up into kind of the 38-47% range, which is phenomenal. Now, how do we do that? Well, combination of things. We got better on network. We got better with Outlook. And we even implemented a number of changes that helped start up. But I think the biggest things had to do with COVID. And so there's no doubt that we got some benefit in our user satisfaction metric from the sheer fact that a lot of our users moved off base and were on their home network. No question, we got some benefit from that. There's a whole lot of things that, well, excuse me, let me be specific. Email, we believe, actually works better through VPN. Of course, when we first got into the COVID situation, so kind of think late March, beginning of April, we didn't have enough VPN capacity. So we dramatically increased VPN capacity. And you can see it in the data. You can see chatter about VPNs in February was maybe 10% of comments. March, April, VPN and remote access got up to around 50% of comments, and now it's back down to kind of the 10% range. So we moved into COVID, people go off base, they hit the bottleneck at VPN, we fixed the bottleneck at VPN, we fixed a number of other things, we roll out CVR, and our numbers have been up ever since, although not quite as high as they were in late May. So, by the way, CVR, tremendous hit. So I don't know how many of you have used CVR. Essentially, it's Microsoft Teams, cloud scale. It's kind of the commercial version of Teams. Huge hit, and there's no question that's pulling up our numbers a little bit as well. People like it. The people that use it really, really like it. The only negatives that I get on CVR are some people can't get to it because they work in a more classified type of environment. That's understandable. Some people don't really need it on their job. That's also understandable. But for the people that use it and need it and can get to it, they love it. So how can we help each other? I already harped on the minimum PC or the PC minimum standards. So, if you lead an organization in the Air Force, this is the number one thing that you can do to improve user experience for your unit. If you need a pointer to the new standards or anything else, let me know. We put out a memo that waived the moratorium that was in place on PC purchasing. So if you need help with that, let me know. Feel free, if you're a software program or a functional community and you need a bit of a consult on whatever it is pertaining to UX, feel free to pull me in. Happy to do it. I do that kind of thing all the time. Another big one, so if you are a contractor and maybe in business development and you see RFPs from the government that are either do a really good job of asking for a good user experience, or maybe they do a really bad job of asking for a good user experience, feel free to send them to me. I love to get those. We're working on how to acquire better user experience skills and services and results. And so examples of where that's done well or bad are good. And I also sometimes will reach out to programs and offer them a few opinions on their draft RFP or RFI or whatever to help see if we can improve it from a UX perspective. So feel free to do that. If you are internal to the Air Force or, like on a long-term contract or something, and you are a UX person, you should join the UX design community of interest. There's the email. Kathy McClellan helps me administer it. Provide feedback on CXO's 10 Most Wanted. So this is government only. If you happen to be on the CHES version of Teams, I've got a team set up where people can provide feedback on specific applications, and I have a rank of the 10 most wanted 10 applications that most need improvement in UX are there. And then develop user experience skills in your organization. I put out a LinkedIn article back in the fall that is called New to UX, Start Here. And there's about 6 or 7 websites and articles that I think are particularly good at introducing people to the concept. And then if you are an airman and want to learn more about user experience, or if you are more of, let's say you're a requirements or functional professional, something like that, you're not, you don't cut code, but you're in IT, I would point you to Digital U. So Digital U is now up and available, and I don't know the exact number, but we have a vast amount of access to Udemy. And I just did a quick search on user experience design on Udemy, and these 2 things popped up right at the beginning of the list. So they look like pretty good classes. I'd be interested in your feedback for somebody who wants to just sort of learn the basics of what does user experience process look like, and what are we trying to do here. And then, of course, there's lots of great, if you go down that list there on the left, all of the major UX designs, tools, and even some of the design systems and other things are there. So there's a whole lot out there that's paid for already by the Air Force that airmen can access and use. And then, of course, Digital U is getting a lot better. I'm involved in that as well. So I will just end with, we can do this. We are doing this, and you can do this. There's a big part that you can play individually. And thank you. That's where you can reach me, and sources. And that's all I've got. So I think I'll take Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. This was incredibly informative. I've learned a lot. We do have some questions here. So let me get to the first one. So how do you distinguish UX or design thinking from HMI or HFE from a DoD point of view? And are the deliverables of HFE different than that of UX?
That is a really good question. So UX, design thinking, and human factors engineering are 3 different concepts, somewhat related. First, human factors engineering. That's pretty closely related to user experience, right? Although it could apply to the non-digital domain. Human factors engineering is kind of an industrial design notion. The term is probably a little bit more dated, but it's definitely alive, but it's been around a long time. So human factors engineering is, broadly speaking, design and analysis of, the experience of using something, right? But it doesn't have to be digital technology. User experience is typically confined to, a digital experience, although it doesn't have to be, but it's typically used in the context of a digital experience. You'll find people that use it more broadly. So user experience and human factors are very closely related, but different. One's a little bit more engineering and analytical, and one is a little bit more about designing. But I don't consider them that different. Now, design thinking is a different notion. Design thinking is typically refers to a specific methodology, which is Tim Brown's IDEO, and Stanford D School methodology. And it's a 5-step process, which I believe is empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And if you think, really what design thinking is about is it doesn't have to be related to digital. It doesn't have to be related to user experience, really, even, right? You can use the design thinking methodology like I did on my career. It is very broadly applicable. You can use the design thinking methodology to design policy, to design, almost anything, right? It's a great methodology. I think the best explanation of the design thinking methodology is that it's really about creativity. All right, it's a methodology that draws on the design world, particularly kind of the idea of divergent and convergent thinking, and also prototyping and testing. It draws out some of the things from the design world and then applies them to being more creative as an organization, dealing with problems. Over.
Appreciate that. I would be remiss if I didn't ask, because I'm an acquisition guy. I'm curious, your thoughts on, because you talked a lot about IT, computers, those kind of things. How does this parlay into the greater, acquisition, if you will, profession, as far as acquisition getting more involved with, what the user wants?
Yeah, really good question. And I'm trying to, I've got a lot on my plate. This is an extremely important one. I have not given it enough attention. I've been trying to find a lot of partners, and I do talk to a lot of people about this in acquisition, not just in the Air Force, but around the government. And so I think to really improve user experience, we're going to have to work closely with the acquisition community. What I hear frequently from acquisition people is, hey, Colt, totally agree. We have a UX problem. We need to do better. But I don't know how to ask for user experience in an RFP. I mean, I can write in an RFP, give us a good user experience. It doesn't mean anything. I need to know, how do I ask for it? How do I ask for the right skills? How do I ask for the right results? How do I measure that result? Those are the questions that I hear from acquisition people. I think they're kind of looking for a bit of a playbook on what is the language, what are the things that I need to do, like in a section L and a section M and all those kinds of things. I don't know jack about acquisition. Let me just be clear. So that's what I would say. I think what I hear from acquisition is they're very open to, just like they were open to, acquiring in a more agile way, and doing agile development and DevSecOps. I think what I'm hearing from them is, hey, help me bake these concepts into an acquisition so that we can get a better user experience on the back end. I don't have an answer yet to that. I got a lot of opinions, and like I said, I've been working with a number of people who have they're helping feed me information. And at some point here, I want to put a very concerted effort into this. And to be perfectly honest with you, I do need help. Like, maybe I need a few people in the acquisition community that, can help dig into this a bit, and we can figure out what's the playbook to give out across the acquisition community.
Great. A few more questions coming in here. Just your thoughts or advice on how UX can play into urban and city planning.
Oh, great question. Definitely not my area of expertise, but that is a really good question. I would say a lot, first of all, there are many thousands of people plus whole dedicated academic programs, in the university environment, that deal with just this, right? Future urban design, environmental design, and all of those things. And I guess what I would say is the methodologies that you use in this world, in my world, are pretty applicable, right? We probably use some of the same types of user research techniques. Contextual inquiry, for example. Contextual inquiry is, where a user experience researcher is sitting in somebody's cubicle or maybe on the flight line and watching, somebody interact with the system and do things with the system in the context of their work, right? I can see how that exact technique could be applied in urban design, right? Essentially what you're doing is you're probably, standing there with a clipboard or an iPad and taking notes and watching how people, interact with the environment around them in an urban setting. So not my area of expertise, so I'll probably just leave it at that. But I would say that a lot of the techniques that we use, particularly the prototyping, we do a lot of digital prototyping in the UX world. And they most definitely do a lot of that in kind of the urban planning and urban design world, for sure. In fact, to be honest with you, a lot of our prototyping techniques are in some degree modeled off of what came from the, the built environment. So there's a lot of similarity, and a lot of the tools, I would say, are applicable across both.
Great. I think we'll do one more. It looks like a lot of people were a little bit maybe jealous of your desk setup there, and they want to know if there's any sort of enterprise plan for government iPad Pros, or somehow have easier access to MacBook Pros, or some sort of standard issue Windows computers. So an enterprise-wide plan for anything like that.
Oh. Yeah, glad you asked. Okay, so I don't have the latest information on this, but the bring your own approved device pilot is, I believe it is already underway. So no, would the government buy you one? No, you'd have to buy your own, but you can connect and do that. Essentially, we put a container. It works the same way that mine does, to be honest. From what I understand, it's I believe a BlackBerry container. It works the same way, but it would be your own device. So that's good. I think, I have one because my boss, Mr. Marion, approved it, but I don't think we give out too many of them. But yeah, I couldn't live without it, particularly given, you saw the specs on my government issued machine, which, by the way, on my government issued machine, I kind of feel like I should probably be the last one in the Air Force to have that machine. I want it. I want to keep it. I've had multiple people offer to replace it, but I want to keep it because it is a constant reminder that this is what our airmen are using, and it gives me some motivation every time I try and check my email on it to do my job. Yeah, I'm going to stay on it, and I'll just keep pressing forward. So that's what I know. Bring your own approved device. Now then, the ITAS program, as that rolls out, they are replacing the end user devices. FYI, most people probably know that. And here is the dilemma. Beyond, for the vast majority of units in the Air Force, their PC is supplied by their unit, and that's good and bad. I mean, it means that we're very responsive to local mission needs, so that's good. I like that. But for a unit, it's a heavy lift to plan for that, budget for that, and execute on that. And then I think there's probably a lot of cost pressure when it comes time to actually pull the trigger and upgrade a bunch of PCs for the unit. And then, maybe that's what's forcing or encouraging people to go and buy, spinning discs and things that cost a little less. And they don't even cost that much less, to be honest with you. Hard disk now is more, but it's not that much more. I don't think we're gonna see a centralized purchasing to replace, to upgrade those devices. I don't think we're going to see that.
Great. Sir, this was an amazing presentation. I see the comments flowing in, thanking you. I appreciate it. We appreciate it. So grateful to have you here. Want to thank our sponsor, Red Hat, as well. Just a reminder for everyone that's on the call, we have a next event, October 21st, to kick off to our diversity series. I just dropped the link in the chat, so everyone has the link to register. It's going to be on 10/21, 12 to 1. So appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for being here. Colt, sir, thanks again. Edgar, Red Hat, thank you for being today's sponsor. Appreciate it, and I hope you all have a fantastic Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.